Welcome back to the True Detectives podcast. I'm Adrian Smith, your guide through the twists and turns of reality that are so unbelievable they'll make you say, WTF. We're diving into a case today that's all about unlikely detectives, crazy investigations, and a mystery that'll keep you guessing. So buckle up because this ride is going to be wild. And joining me to help unpack this bizarre case is Dr. Julia Jones, an expert in memory and eyewitness testimony. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm always up for a good mystery, and this one definitely caught my attention.
Okay, so let's set the scene for our listeners. We're talking about a gritty urban landscape, the kind of place where skateboarders rule the streets. Our main character, Cam, is one of those skateboarding whizzes. But he's not just any skater. Cam has a photographic memory, which basically makes his mind a high-definition video recorder. He uses this incredible ability to analyze every move, memorize complex tricks, and basically become a skateboarding savant. But this gift turns into a burden when Cam witnesses a brutal murder. His mind captures every detail of the crime, except there's a huge problem. Every shred of physical evidence vanishes without a trace. No body, no weapon, nothing. You spent years studying memory. So I'm really curious about this. Let's talk about photographic memory for a second. Is this a real thing, or is it Hollywood hype?
Well, the idea of a perfectly accurate photographic memory is often exaggerated. It's incredibly rare to have a truly eidetic memory. What we often see are highly developed mnemonic skills, which are techniques that people use to improve their memory. But for the sake of this story, let's assume Cam has a truly exceptional ability to recall details.
So Cam's mind becomes the crime scene, holding all the pieces of the puzzle. But how reliable can his memory be, especially after witnessing something so traumatic?
That's a crucial question. Even with an exceptional memory, recall isn't foolproof. Stress and trauma can significantly impact how the brain processes and stores information. So even if Cam remembers a lot of details, there's always a chance that his memory could be distorted or incomplete.
And to make matters worse, the police don't believe Cam's story. They see a teenage skateboarder, probably prone to exaggeration, and they dismiss him. It's a classic case of not taking teenagers seriously. But Cam knows what he saw. He refuses to let this go. Luckily, he has a loyal friend, Frankie, who believes him without a doubt. Together, they're like a modern-day Scooby-Doo gang, determined to crack this seemingly impossible case. Just when it seems like they're chasing shadows, they stumble upon a tiny clue. A single brass button with a peculiar swirl pattern, practically hidden near where Cam claims the murder happened. It's the only physical evidence they have to connect to the crime. What's your take on this? How much weight can one little button carry in an investigation?
Physical evidence is often crucial in investigations. It's tangible, it can be analyzed scientifically, and it offers a level of objectivity that eyewitness accounts sometimes lack. But in this case, it's just one small button against a mountain of missing evidence. It does make you think, though. What if the button holds the key to unlocking the truth? It could be the thread that unravels the entire mystery.
And that brings us to Cam and Frankie's next move. They hear about a street fair happening right next to the warehouse, which they decide to use as a cover to blend in and observe. I can't help but wonder about the psychological impact of this whole experience on Cam. He's witnessed a horrific event, and now he's putting himself back into that environment, all while the police don't believe him.
You're right to point that out, for a teenager, especially one who's experienced trauma. This kind of self-driven investigation can be incredibly stressful. There's a real risk of re-traumatization, especially if he starts questioning his own memories, or if the investigation leads him into dangerous situations.
And dangerous it gets. At the fair, Cam spots a man he believes is the murderer. But before they can do anything, he disappears into the shadows near the warehouse, the very place where Cam claims to have witnessed the crime.
So what do you think is going on here? Is Cam's memory playing tricks on him? Or is there a killer out there who's incredibly good at covering his tracks? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We have a teenage boy with an extraordinary memory claiming to have witnessed a crime, with zero physical evidence to back it up. And now we have a potential suspect lurking around the scene.
It's like we're standing at a crossroads, and each path leads to a different truth. On one hand, Cam's vivid memory could be our only guide to solving this case. But on the other hand, his trauma might be distorting what he saw.
We left off with Cam and Frankie, our teenage detectives, following their suspect into the shadows. Near the warehouse, it's a risky move, especially considering their only weapon is Cam's potentially unreliable memory, and a single button as evidence.
It's like something out of a movie. These two kids, armed with nothing but their determination, are about to walk into a potentially dangerous situation. It makes you wonder, What's going through their minds at this point?
Well, think about it. Cam's already experienced a traumatic event, and now he's putting himself back into the environment where it happened. That can be a trigger for all sorts of emotions: fear, anxiety, maybe even a sense of urgency to prove he's not making things up.
And Frankie, what about her? She's chosen to follow Cam into this. What does that tell us about their friendship?
Frankie's unwavering support for Cam is remarkable. She's his anchor, his validation in a situation where everyone else doubts him. It shows a deep level of trust and loyalty, which can be incredibly empowering, especially for someone like Cam who's dealing with so much internal conflict.
Let's talk about the warehouse for a moment.
Yeah.
This place is more than just a setting. It's almost a character in the story. It's where the alleged murder happened, and now Cam and Frankie are going back in, but this time, they're not just witnesses, they're investigators.
Exactly. The warehouse represents the unknown, the place where Cam's memories are most vivid, and where the truth, whatever it may be, might be hidden. It's a reminder that even in familiar places, darkness can lurk, and the line between memory and reality can become blurred.
And that line gets even blurrier when Cam and Frankie catch up to the suspect. They find him rummaging through a duffel bag, looking just as surprised to see them as they are to see him. But here's the catch. There's no sign of a body, no weapon, no evidence of any crime. This is where things get really interesting. We have Cam's vivid memory of a murder. But the physical reality doesn't seem to match up. What could be happening here?
This is where we need to consider the fallibility of memory, even a memory as strong as Cam's. What he believes he saw might be a mixture of actual events and details that his mind has filled in, especially under the influence of stress and trauma.
So, are you suggesting that Cam might be imagining things?
Not necessarily imagining, but his memory could be playing tricks on him. Certain details might be exaggerated or distorted, and that's not uncommon in situations involving high stress or trauma.
But what about the button that was found near the warehouse? And Cam recognized it as belonging to the murderer he saw in his memory.
The button is an interesting piece of the puzzle. It's physical evidence, which is generally more reliable than eyewitness testimony. But even physical evidence can be misleading. It needs to be analyzed, its origins verified. We don't know how the button got there, or if it's genuinely connected to the alleged murder.
So, we're left with a lot of questions and very few answers. Cam is convinced he saw a murder. But the evidence is either missing or ambiguous. What happens next?
Well, Cam confronts the suspect, accusing him of murder and using the button as proof. But the suspect denies everything. He claims he found the button, that he has nothing to do with any crime.
It becomes a classic he said, she said situation. Who are we supposed to believe? A teenage boy with an extraordinary memory, or a seemingly harmless adult who claims to have simply found a lost button?
This is where the limitations of eyewitness testimony become apparent. Without corroborating evidence, it's difficult to determine whose account is more reliable.
And let's not forget, the police have already dismissed Cam's story. So who are they going to believe now?
It's a tough situation. On one hand, we have to acknowledge that eyewitness testimony can be unreliable, especially under stressful circumstances. But on the other hand, we can't automatically dismiss someone's claims simply because they're young or their story seems incredible.
This is a great point. It's a reminder that truth can be elusive. And sometimes, even with the best intentions, it can be hard to separate fact from fiction. We're back with the final chapter of this case. Cam has just confronted the suspect, accusing him of murder. With the button as his only piece of evidence, but the suspect denies any involvement, claiming he simply found the button.
So where do we go from here? How can we possibly unravel this tangled web of memory, perception, and missing evidence?
It's a frustrating situation, isn't it? We're left with a stalemate, two conflicting accounts, very little evidence, and a police force that's already skeptical of Cam's story. It really highlights the complexities of criminal justice, where sometimes even with the best efforts, the truth remains out of reach.
And what about Cam and Frankie? What happens to them after this intense encounter? Well, despite their bravery and determination, they walk away empty-handed. They haven't solved the mystery, and they're left with more questions than answers. But I think this experience, as difficult as it was, has taught them some valuable lessons.
What kind of lessons are you talking about?
For one, they've learned about the power and the limitations of memory. Cam's experience shows us that memory, even an exceptional one, isn't always a perfect recording of events. It can be influenced by stress, trauma, and even our own desires to make sense of the world.
And Frankie, what about her role in all of this?
Frankie demonstrates the importance of support and validation, especially when someone is going through a traumatic experience. Her unwavering belief in Cam gave him the strength to pursue his own truth, even when everyone else doubted him. Their friendship is a testament to the power of connection and empathy.
So even though they didn't crack the case, they gained something valuable from this experience. It's almost like they went through a crash course in the complexities of truth,
Yeah.
memory, and the criminal justice system.
Exactly. And it's a reminder to all of us that sometimes the journey is just as important as the destination. The process of questioning, investigating, and grappling with uncertainty can be a learning experience in itself, even if it doesn't lead to a neat and tidy resolution.
That's a great point. And I think it leaves our listeners with something to ponder. What happens when the lines between truth and perception become blurred? Can we ever truly rely on our memories? Or should we always question what we think we know?
Those are excellent questions, and they're questions that we all face in our own lives, not just in extreme situations like this case. It's a reminder to approach information with a healthy dose of skepticism, to be open to different perspectives, and to recognize that sometimes the most compelling mysteries are those that remain unsolved.
Well said. A huge thanks to you for joining us on the True Detectives podcast and for shedding light on the fascinating and often frustrating world of memory and investigation.
It was my pleasure. I always enjoy delving into these complex cases.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this wild ride. We hope you enjoyed this investigation into a case that truly blurs the lines between fact and mystery. Don't forget to rate and follow the True Detectives podcast for more mind-blowing real-life stories. That will make you question everything you thought you knew. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep searching for the truth.